I tried to recreate one of my favorite Berserk moments in 3D, but what started as a single shot eventually turned into a full cinematic with over 20 shots, motion capture, and I even had an original soundtrack made for it. So let me show you the whole process. For me, this moment always felt special because of how much it changed the story of Berserk, and looking at it, it honestly didn't seem all that difficult to recreate. I basically just needed a snowy landscape, some giant mountains, a massive city in the background, and of course, Guts and Griffith. So naturally, I picked up my iPad and started sculpting Guts. Yeah, you can see it didn't go that well, so I gathered a bunch of references for both Guts and Griffith. And thankfully, my friend Zambon is much better at sculpting than I am, so while he worked on the head sculpts, I focused on the armor, textures and the environment. For a while everything was moving pretty smoothly, the characters were coming together, the environment was taking shape, but then I had to take a short break and focus on my studies. And as time went on, the project slowly moved further and further out of sight, and every now and then I would open the Blender file, just look at it, move a few things around, and the worst part, the longer I stayed away from it, the more flaws I started seeing. And honestly, I was pretty close to giving up on it completely. But then one day, something really unexpected happened. The team at Rococo sent me the motion capture bundle, including the Smart Suit Pro, the gloves, and even the head rig that I would end up using later for facial animation. That really made me excited to work on the project again and create something even bigger, so I started planning out the video and come up with new ideas. The opening scene would feature Kiaska asking Guts an important question before embracing him, and the environment was inspired by one of the waterfall locations from the Berserk movies, but of course there were a few problems. I needed a Kiaska model and facial animation. And if you've seen my previous projects, you'll know that facial animation isn't my strongest skill. So this time, I decided to use MetaHuman for the face animations, and using Zambon's sculpts as a base, I was able to create MetaHuman versions of all three characters, and I also recreated the outfits in Marvel's Designer. With all that done, the characters were finally coming together and I started experimenting with facial performance, and yeah, once that was ready, it was finally time to jump into the mocap suit. And yeah, the setup was actually pretty straightforward. Once everything was connected, I opened Rococo Studio, and I have to admit it felt a little strange at first, but seeing my movements on screen was actually really fun, so I actually just started recording the takes that I needed, and within 15 minutes probably, I had all my takes recorded with different timings, different poses, and in general just different variations that I could choose from. So all that was left was retargeting the animation to my characters, cleaning it up, and then building the environment around it. And I found this really nice looking scan online, which was perfect for this environment, so I just put it in the scene, and then all I had to do was the waterfall, but that was honestly a nightmare because I convinced myself that simulating it would be a good idea, but I wasted multiple days on that and eventually accepted defeat and then switched to a much simpler solution. And yeah, after simulating the cloth, hair and finishing the lighting, the first scene was finally complete. Around that time, my friend Rakuma introduced me to Portra, who offered to help with the soundtrack and even started experimenting with the Guts theme. I loved how peaceful the scene felt with the music, and while that was perfect for the beginning, I wanted the next scene to feel completely different. In this scene, Guts wakes up alone, he's covered in wounds, completely exhausted, and before I could animate any of that, I needed to update my Guts model. I retextured him, added more scars, and just overall made him look more rough. And then really quickly I jumped into the mocap suit, recorded the takes I needed, and then moved on to the environment, which was fairly simple because it was just a grass field at night, but I needed the close-up shots to feel believable, so I simulated the grass in Houdini to make them interact with Guts. And then there was just one thing I needed to add, which was the rain. But as always, I didn't know how to pull that off until T4 came in. He created this amazing setup that allowed raindrops to properly collide with guts and flow naturally across the skin, and with the rain finished, the scene was finally done. But before moving into the snowfield sequence, I wanted to add a transition that tied everything together. So I created a shot where Guts tries to reach the moon, but then the moon transforms into the eclipse, Guts lowers his hand, and as the camera follows it down, the entire world around him begins to change. So I just had to render out the same animation in 2 different scenarios, and in After Effects I did the transition as well as the eclipse effect. And one last thing I added was the grass from the previous moments to frame the shot a little bit better. For the snowfield scene, I no longer wanted to just recreate the confrontation between Guts and Griffith, but instead I wanted to show how Guts ended up in that moment and what he had to leave behind along the way. And that meant creating a much bigger environment, and most importantly, I had to get the massive city in the background right. So I scrapped my old version and completely rebuilt it, and at the same time I kept getting updates about the music, which was coming out really epic.
When we first saw that city reveal, we knew that was the apex. We absolutely had to bring that part home. It took a lot of hours of surgery to make everything come out the way that it needed to. There's a lot of moving pieces, but you never can lose sight of the bigger picture.
Getting those updates definitely pushed me to work harder on the shots and keep moving forward. At this point I finally had a workflow where I was able to get through the shots pretty quickly. The cape simulation was working, the animations were coming together, and then I made another terrible decision, the snow simulation. I really wanted a close-up shot of Guts walking through the snow, and for some reason I thought that was going to be simple, but it wasn't. I spent almost 2 weeks learning how snow simulations worked in Houdini. Sometimes the snow looked too puffy, and most of the time it just didn't have enough detail. So after countless failed simulations, I finally had a setup that could simulate enough snow particles to get the look I was after. I really struggled with Griffith's hair, which turned out to be another challenge because his hairstyle consisted of multiple layers that all had to be simulated separately, but also behaved like it was one hairstyle. So that also took me quite a while, but eventually I also got a result that felt natural enough. And without really noticing it, I finally reached a shot that started this entire project. And with the updated environment, the new character models, and everything I had learned along the way, creating it wasn't nearly as difficult as it was at the beginning of the project. And while the final render was running, I received one last update, the finished soundtrack. And at that point, all that was left to do was drag it into the timeline and press play.
Guts. キャスか。グリフィスを救出したら出てくって。けじめだけはきっちりつけたいんだ。
If you'd like to watch a full cinematic, you can find it right here. And before I end this video, I want to say thank you to everyone who supported me throughout the project, and a huge thanks to Rococo for supporting it as well. And yeah, I really hope you enjoyed it. See you guys.